The Purpose Effect episode with Athena Perez. Athena is awesome. We have been encouraged to connect for the last few years and really just got around to it, and I'm so glad that we did. I benefited a ton from just the opportunity to have this conversation with her, and I think you will as well. She's very transparent and vulnerable and bold and helpful in what she shares. We talk about a handful of things. We talk about her weight loss journey, where she started at over 500 pounds and has lost over 260 pounds in that journey already. We talk about her journey and experience in CrossFit. We talk about her recent exposure and experience with a 40-day fast. And most of our conversation revolves around kind of all of those experiences being put together in her first book that has already been released and her second book that is coming out soon. Athena shares some very, very transparent and even painful experiences and stories in this conversation. But what I really love the most about it is at the end of all of these experiences, it points back to how she could take responsibility for herself, how she could take agency over her own perspective, over her thoughts, over her responses, over her actions. And that really applies to all of us in all situations at all times. Athena is an encourager, and she brings light and hope and strength to the people around her. And I felt that even through this conversation, and I think that you will as well. Episode 2 of the Purpose Effect series. We had a really great conversation with Ryan Rivard about his transformation from overdose to summiting Everest in episode 1. So you guys can head back and check that out. Today we are talking to Athena Perez, and Ryan left in our question chain in our last episode. Athena, Ryan left his question for you, which is related to the work that you do. What is your why?
When I came into just fitness in general, I felt like there was this massive gap in the space. There's a lot of people that talk about intensity and performance and competition and all of that. And I knew it, but there was very few people that were talking about, the people one that needed fitness the most, that needed to get healthier. I always kind of figured those were the ones sitting out in the parking lot. And I knew that because it was me. So it just felt very natural that I could see both sides really clearly. I fell in love with getting healthy. And at the time, I just understood, what it felt like to make that kind of change. It was an astronomical change. And so the understanding of, being intimidated and ashamed or overlooked in places that people don't typically feel like they belong there. So I wanted to help coaches understand these athletes better and wanted them to realize, that they were capable of far more than they believe, not because, I read a book, but because I had lived it myself. So it never felt very complicated for me. To me, it just felt obvious.
Hmm. Yeah, one of the things that came out of the last conversation, even with Ryan, a very simple but I think significant takeaway is the fact that when we go on our own transformation journeys, I often think we end up just creating the thing we wish we had for ourselves. And when I look at your story, that's what I see is, you had to be a significant pioneer and kind of front runner or forerunner in this particular kind of pursuit and demographic and in what you did. And looking back on it, had I had help, could I have done it sooner? Could I have avoided some of the kind of pitfalls of it? Could it have been more effective? Could I have maybe not gone so far the other direction? Yeah, and so I think you very much have found the niche essentially of what it is you wish you had.
Oh, yeah. That's pretty accurate, actually.
Yeah. And that's the whole thing, right? It's like the higher you climb on that kind of hierarchy of self-actualization or discovering meaning or discovering purpose, eventually it goes from self-actualization to shared actualization. And like you got to share it. And that's the whole process of transformation. I think when you have the I was once one way and now I'm another, what in the world are you gonna do but talk about that? And ideally help other people experience that for themselves. And so I look at all the things you are kind of sharing, curating, creating, educating on, and that is what I see is the attempt at packaging your own transformation journey in hopes that other people can experience the kind of like freedom and transformation you have.
Oh, for sure. Well said.
Okay, well, we're going to jump right in. main thing I want to talk about today is the book that you have coming out, and it's part two. And per my understanding of prior conversations we have, this is kind of the first year talking about it in any significant way, kind of publicly, and putting it out there in the world. So that takes a lot of courage to do so. So before we get into part two, I have some snippets or excerpts that I've got that we're gonna chat through together. But before that, can you give a bit of insight and context on that transformation, on your own transformation of where you've been versus and where you've arrived to now, and even where you're going, like what you hope the future to look like. So give a little bit of your own context, and maybe inside of that, provide some insights on part one. What was book one, and kind of thesis summary in that way.
Yeah. I've had this blog, I call it the journal. And, I've just been kind of documenting when that health journey started. It started long before I started CrossFit. It started with a lot of counseling and a lot of therapy. And so I just started documenting the stories over there. So it's been 20 years already. I had walked into a CrossFit affiliate when I was back in 2017. And ultimately, the goal wasn't, I didn't see myself as I'm going to go do CrossFit. That's not exactly how it happened. I was on like a walker and two canes, and that's how I got around. And my only goal at that time, just because I couldn't see past that initial point, was just to be able to walk. The doctor said, "Hey, Athena, if you don't do something about your legs, you're going to lose the ability to walk." So I knew I had to do something really fast. So that was the immediate goal. And pretty soon, you find a community, which is what I did. And they were very, very, very supportive, and they're like, "Hey, you can try boot camp." And then it went from boot camp to, "You can try this." And it was just one brave step after another. And long story short, we within 2 years, I had lost the first 200 pounds just about, and ended up becoming a coach myself. I would later open up my own affiliate specifically to help people where I started, and that has been the mission. So book one really talks about like the history. It starts talking about like, how does somebody get to 500 pounds, so that people understand like not something that happens in one day, it's something that happens over a lifetime.
Hmm. Can you actually pause there for a second and share a couple of those like anecdotes from that? I think people would be very curious. Yeah, and I'll follow up with the reason why after.
hmm So I think it's different for everybody, and all the athletes that I've ever met too. There's threads that are very similar, but it's how we use food. So for me, it was a coping mechanism that started off when I was really, really young. It was abuse, very harsh physical abuse. And so it would just became that what's easy access? Food is easy access for a kid. And so that's what I used to soothe and to cope. And it's what I learned to handle stress or really anything, whether I was happy, sad, joyful, bored, it didn't matter. That's what I went to. So, a lot of kids when they're growing up, they learn things like running and playing outside and doing all these things. That wasn't my life. So yeah, that's how it started.
Got it. Yeah. Yeah, I think it's just valuable to share like kind of the incremental nature of how you head in that direction as well, because it does happen slowly and with compounding decisions or compounding results from decisions day after day.
It multiplies. Yeah, that's a good word. It compounds. Like if you're 12 years old, for instance, and you are heavier than everyone else because nobody knows what you're dealing with. You go to school, you get picked on, gum gets put in your hair, you come home, you cry. What do you do? And so it's this vicious circle. The more upset you become and the more lonely and isolated you feel, the more you eat. And then it just keeps going round and round and round and never stops.
Yeah. In alignment with kind of the emphasis of these conversations really being very passionately aimed at helping people discover like a sense of purpose and a sense of meaning, there are very few things that I have seen more effectively distract people from that sense of purpose or that sense of meaning, besides the incremental movement in the wrong direction that they don't even realize is happening at the time. And it is like these little coping mechanisms or these little like compromising decisions that in the moment do seem like maybe even appropriate responses to the stimulus that you're having or the overwhelm that you feel. But it really is kind of the lack of awareness that is headed in just the kind of anti-vision direction of your purpose in general. I had a friend once talking to me about this very kind of exact concept, talking about how like all of our biggest problems or kind of our biggest vices or the things that maybe stand in the way between us and our sense of purpose or our sense of meaning, let's just call them like tigers. And he's like, tigers are not something that you would ever mess with. You may look at them and recognize kind of the power of them. And yeah, with a tiger, you maybe even appreciate its beauty to some extent. He's like, but you know it's dangerous and you're not just gonna like approach it in the wild or in a pen. Either way. It's like you're gonna stay away from the tiger. He's like, but every tiger started as a like a kitten, as a cub, and they're adorable and there's no sense of threat. And if you did see it, you would approach it really with no hesitancy whatsoever. He's like, but that's kind of how it works as we develop these vices and as we head in that wrong direction, as we walk alongside this kitten until it becomes this ferocious thing in our lives. And it's way harder to overcome it at that point than it is just to not approach the kitten.
I think with this context too, I think that there needs to be some understanding there as well that so much of it, because it's not something that you consciously think about. It doesn't even cross your mind, especially if you've had these habits your whole life where they start when you're too young to understand what you're developing. There's no reasoning when you're 7 years old. You just put it wherever you put it, and then it's not a conscious thought. It's like any time that you're turning to, especially when I was young, it is now, but when you're young, you don't have the ability to say, if I do this, this is what's going to happen. It's just a conscious autopilot habit.
Yeah. And that is the way you end up at 500 pounds or the opposite is designing your life really in a way that the subconscious decisions move you in the direction you actually want. And yeah, I mean, at 7 years old or as a kid, those things start to get formed. It's not like you're being like very metacognitive or
It's not a
operating like in your
choice,
executive brain at
right?
that
It's not a
point. Yeah.
choice. Yeah.
Okay. Very, very interesting. Yeah. I think it's so valuable, particularly today when it comes to just like habit formation or behavior change and transformation and growth in general, to just emphasize like the incremental things are what become monumental. And I'm interested to hear at what point it went from all of these habits for you having been formed kind of very subconsciously, kind of and as a reaction to your environment, to when that shifted to becoming very high agency in your approach of, okay, now I can decide. Is that talked about a bit in that first book, like as you went from the history to the beginnings?
Funny that you mentioned that. I don't know if there was really ever this moment where I feel like, "Oh, okay, it's great now." It's never been that way. It's been a constant 3 steps forward, 2 steps back, and every layer that you uncover from whatever past that you have reintroduces new stress, something that you're gonna have to work through, and new stress can cause those old habits. So what was funny is that first year that I started really changing and that first bucket came off relatively fast. I mean, you're talking 187 pounds the first year. And, but it was a very controlled environment. Like I set myself up to win. Like foods that weren't going to support my goals did not come into the house. And I had a schedule and multiple alarms, like it was clockwork. But the minute that life changed and suddenly his life changed and there was new introductions to the environment, it changed. So direct answer to your question is I don't know if it ever got there. Even sitting here today, I don't know if I could ever say, oh yeah, it's figured out. I think it's going to be something that I constantly have to unthread forever. It's a work in progress.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think yeah, transformation by nature and growth by nature is a never ending process. There's not even really the opportunity for like arrival fallacy because there is no arrival. It's just this continuous process of evolution. And I think one of one of the frames of thought that's been very helpful for me, just kind of in my own processes, is recognizing that change is inevitable, but growth is a choice. And there have been times in my life where I'm like, I like where I've gotten, and I would be comfortable if we could just stay here for a bit because here is better than what there was. But change is inevitable, and my response to that change is what is either going to result in growth or really kind of like deforming or kind of regressing, even in some ways. So I think it's really helpful to hear. And I think it's helpful to hear that the beginning point for you of, hey, I'm 500 pounds and the journey starts now was, I'm sure, filled with elements of inspiration, motivation, and willpower. But really, the biggest lever that you pulled initially was design. It sounds like you very intentionally designed your environment so that you did not have to maximize your use of willpower by constantly saying no to temptation or constantly saying no to your typical kind of standard operating procedure, which I think is so healthy.
I don't know if that first day I would say I knew what I needed to do to set myself up to win, but I don't know necessarily that it was coming from a place of motivation or inspiration. It was quite literally coming from a place of fear. Like, if I don't, this is what's going to happen. And to me, the discomfort of going into something unknown seemed a whole lot better than the pain of being in a wheelchair forever.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that context is really interesting. Was there a moment that do you recall in early on in your journey, was there a moment that shifted and the journey became less about what you were trying to avoid and more about having the opportunity to look at the horizon and see the potential of it and be excited rather than avoidance?
It evolved. It was a slow evolution, and that just came with, like the first time I was able to do a push-up or the first time I was able to do something on my own. It was like, wow, like this is possible.
Yeah. Powered by the evidence. Yeah.
Yes. Having to getting those little wins was what built it.
Mm. Yeah, that's awesome. Cool. One of the objectives I just always want to have in these conversations is for the folks listening to this, regardless of a very heavy conviction I have is that everybody wants something. And it's to get from some point A to some point B. And that could just be growth. And that's not to say your point A is bad, but we're always like chasing some, per the title of the podcast, Chasing Excellence. We're always chasing something. And the things that are really important to me that I have come to realize is that in my own chase and in my own pursuits, I want to make sure that there is a significant foundation of identity that is not shaken up by what I'm chasing and a significant sense of meaning that I'm connecting to those things. And so I think it's just so valuable to hear of your story, how that started for people, because regardless of what point A looks like, point A begins with vision or anti-vision, one way or the other. Either I definitely don't want that, so I'm going to go the opposite direction, or I do see something I do want, so I'm going to head that way. And then how do you design your life so that the incremental, just kind of subconscious or automatic behaviors start to actually move you in that direction? And that's so much more, that sets you up for success so much more effectively than just like, all right, let's grind it out and let's have the willpower to succeed here. So, yeah, okay, cool. So, book one kind of begins with the context, and then what does it transition into after that?
One just kind of starts with the context and then it tells the story of essentially that first 2 years, what it looked like. And it kind of ended in a really happy place of the idea of lifting the weight. WAIT was essentially like, why had I waited so long? So that was kind of the theme. And it was about figuring out, like, this is who you are. This is why you waited and just being okay with it. And so that was essentially book one.
Okay. What were what were some of the things you discovered as you were asking that question? Wrestling with how long you waited or why you allowed yourself to get to the point that you got before you took the steps? What were some things that you learned about that?
Yeah, I think it was like all the I am statements that I told myself all those years, like I am fat, I am whatever long list of things. And you say those I am statements enough where they become who you are. They become your identity. And so thinking outside of that or thinking that change is possible or all these things that we dream about didn't feel real. It felt like I was like that was imposter syndrome for me. Like it was just a pipe dream. I said it, I didn't really mean it. So that was part of the discovery. And then part of the discovery was just learning like I didn't have to be anything other than child of his, and that's it.
As you buttoned up book one and put it out into the world, is there a singular thing that you hope somebody would walk away with, whether they are in a similar context or situation to you or not? What is the kind of main thing that you would want somebody to walk away with as they finished book one?
Book one, I wanted I I think I just wanted to give people hope that like you can come from some pretty crazy circumstances and have what would appear to be an insurmountable mountain that you can climb and you can get to the you can get to the top. Maybe not necessarily unscathed, but it's possible.
If you've looked into using AI for customer support, you've probably run into the same problem. Most options are off the shelf and don't quite fit your needs. Or it's a great custom solution, but it takes forever to launch. Decagon gives you the best of both worlds. I've actually used Decagon as a user before, so I can speak to how good it actually is. It helps companies create personalized concierge-style customer experiences with AI agents across chat, email, voice, and SMS. They are available 24/7, feel natural to talk to, and can resolve customer requests on their own so businesses can keep up with requests without losing their personal touch. Decagon plugs directly into your existing systems so agents go live quickly. And because workflows can be updated using natural language, teams can make changes themselves, less time managing, more time focused on customers and ROI. Decagon helps power millions of conversations every day for brands you know and love, including Avis, Affirm, Fanatics, and Aura. If you're ready to transform your customer support, go to decagon.ai/excellence to get a personalized demo. Decagon.ai/excellence, DECAGON.ai/excellence. If we're going to invest in how we feel, we should actually know what's going on inside. I've been using Function for a while now for the labs, 160 plus biomarkers, real data on what's happening in my body. It's changed how I think about my health. No guessing, no reacting, just knowing. Next step is adding a Function scan. Advanced MRI scans that screen for hundreds of potential conditions across up to 14 organs, including early signs of cancer before you feel a thing. FDA cleared AI image enhancement, no ionizing radiation, every scan reviewed by board certified radiologists. Combined with the labs, it's the most complete picture of your health available to regular folks like you and I, because the goal was never to live longer in a hospital. It's to live well for 100 healthy years. We use it here. We think you should use it as well. Get ahead of what you can't feel yet. Join at functionhealth.com/excellence or use the gift excellence25 for a $25 credit toward your membership and up to a $200 credit toward your scan. Functionhealth.com/excellence. The thing you reach for when you're tired might be exactly the thing that's keeping you tired. I've been trimming back on caffeine, or at least trying, not eliminating it, just trying to get a little bit more intentional when I get it. Here's what I've noticed. I stopped reaching for it in the afternoon and the 3 p.m. wall got a little bit shorter. Here's why. Caffeine doesn't give you energy. It actually mutes the signal that tells you that you're tired. The fatigue keeps building. When it wears off, well, you know what happens. It all comes crashing down upon you. Your body produces energy through a process that runs on electrolytes, not caffeine. If you are depleted, no amount of coffee is going to fix that. That's what makes Element Lemonade Iced Tea a little bit different. Full black tea extract, not isolated caffeine, bundled with L-theanine, the way it exists in the plant, plus sodium, potassium, and magnesium for some real hydration. No sugar, no artificial colors, less spike, less drop, no crash. It's trusted by CrossFit athletes, Stanford neuroscientists, and Olympic teams. Get a free 8-count sample pack with any purchase when you go to drinkelement.com/excellence. That's the letters LMNT. That's drinkelement.com/excellence.
What is the time frame now? So book one release to book two. What is the time frame been for that?
Yeah. So book number one came out in 2020, and it basically covered 2000, the history up to that year. 2018 is when it stopped. Where it cut off was me coming back from I had taken the level one out at the ranch. So that was basically where it ended, was me getting my level one. And then book two starts essentially the day I got back. That's where it picks up.
Yeah, I think that I have that excerpt for us to talk about.
Yes, you probably do.
I think that I do. Yeah, so we'll jump into that. I would love to have your thoughts here. Maybe kind of in the interim. So right now, as people are exploring your journey, when we're going from book one straight into book two, we're really not missing a beat between those two. But there obviously have been a number of years that have occurred in between these two things. What was kind of the impetus for why share this story now?
I wanted to actually share it 2 years ago, and it was written and it was ready to send to to the editor. And it was just one day where I decided, you know what, I'm going to read back through it. And I did. And I remember walking away with it feeling mad. Like I was bitter. I was mad. I was bitter. And it was reflected in everything I wrote. And I was like, you know what? That was not the lesson. And I said, it's very clear that I do not have this untangled yet. And it needs to wait until I do. And when I came out of the fast that I did recently, it just it illuminated, you have a lot of time to sit with yourself. It forces you to sit with yourself. And then I think I was able to pull out what had been missing.
Yeah, I'm really glad you brought up the fast, particularly because when I had reached out about us having this conversation the first time, that was really going to be the kind of focal point of the conversation is share the experience of the fast. Let's talk about that. And then it's obviously evolved into this because it seems like timing for book 2 was a result or an outcome of having gone into that fast, into that 40-day fast. So I think that's an awesome connector. And maybe before we get into the book 2 content, share a bit about that journey, about that 40 days. Why did you do it? And what were you surprised that you learned? I know you've kind of referenced that it was more of a kind of a spiritual journey than a physical one. And so what was surprising about it? What was the reason for it? And what came out of that?
There was probably 50 reasons why I did that fast. I think I just gotten to a point where I was questioning everything. And one of the things that had kind of surfaced to the top was I had come out of surgery. I had another leg surgery. It was unexpected and it just put me in a funk because it was out of the blue and it was a mistake that had been made from the first one. So it was just the idea of having to start over again and having to go through, the recovery all over again. But I went into that feeling like I was super prepared this time. I'd done all the meal prep and I was really proud of myself. And then what happened is I got out of surgery thinking I was going to be eating all my wonderful, perfect meal prepped items, and only to discover that I didn't want any of it. Like I didn't want freezer burnt shrimp. I wanted pizza. That was going to make me feel better at that time. And so I was disappointed with myself. And somebody during that time had come to me and was asking about one of the documents that I had written on emotional eating. And she said, Athena, is there a cure? And what was crazy and what kind of stuck out at the time was I get really good at talking about things. I can tell somebody about what emotional eating is, I can write things on it, but I can't tell people this is how you fix it. And I'm like, the fact that I didn't know that answer hurt me because I didn't even know how to do it for myself. And so I started digging into just a lot of literature and NIH studies about emotional eating and whether they had made any connections to neural psychiatry and can those neural pathways be fixed? Can I reroute them myself? And I didn't know. And I was like, well, what if I try? So I went into it knowing that it was going to be long. I didn't know it was going to be 40 days, but I knew it was going to have to be long enough where I was going to have to sit with those emotional eating triggers that I knew were going to come up. And I was going to have to, I guess you could just say, I was going to have to face them head on. And I didn't know what that was going to look like when it started, but I knew it was going to happen.
So it was kind of off the cuff then. It wasn't like you just knew you were going to go into this wander into this wilderness and you would come out when it was time to come out. Like there was not a real structure or plan to it.
There wasn't. Mm-mm.
Okay. What was the just for people to know, what was the actual structure of the fast?
The structure was I had set up this spreadsheet to basically track. When I say everything, I mean it was tracking everything. It was tracking the temperature when I woke up, the glucose, blood pressure, standing, blood pressure, sitting. It was tracking stool. It was tracking how I felt. Anything spiritual that I was thinking that day. Was I praying? Was I listening to songs? Was tracking how I felt. Everything that went on during the day got logged in this. It was tracking the weight, my waist measurement, all of it. And initially, I was just, let me see if I'm going to track so many data points that if something's going to happen, I'm going to see it. Something's going to connect, you know. That's how it started. And then I was at about day 13 and just rolling around bored on Instagram and came across Marcus Luttrell, and he had just came out of a 40-day fast. And what caught my attention was the first slide was his wife, Melanie, talking about it. And I was like, 40 days, like, holy crap. And here I was on day 13, and I'm like, I don't know if I can make it that far, but let me keep listening. Like, what was his why? And so the second slide, the next post was him being on a podcast. Now he's not just talking about it, coming 4 days out of it. Now it's been a couple weeks, and he's talking to this podcast host. And the host asked him, what was harder for you to do? Was it buds training, the mental part of buds, which is the SEAL training, or was it this 40-day fast? And what caught my attention was that he said, hands down, no hesitation, he said, the 40-day fast. And it was that moment that I was like, whatever's on the other side of that, I want that. I want to know what you go through when you go through something like that. Like maybe that was the CrossFit functional fitness person in me that was like, hey, I'm not going to be able to be elite in the body. That will probably never be me just because of how much damage I did to it. But maybe I can learn to be more elite in my mind.
Oh, wow. Hmm.
So I was like, whatever that is, I want it. And so that day I was like, we're going to try. We're going to go the full 40. And so I was like, I knew I was going to have to watch it. I knew that that decision should not be made lightly. I knew that there was a lot of risk, but I figured, well, if I'm taking vitals 15, 20 times a day, if something happens, I'm going to see it. So what came out of it was watching the emotional eating triggers happen real time. And I would document what started it, what was the thought, how did I feel, how did I handle it. But a lot of it was just sitting down there and just crying through it until the emotion went away. And then, essentially rerouting the thought that you're fine, you're safe, you don't need to eat right now. That's just not how you cope. And that was essentially what was happening for that 40 days.
Hmm. Wow. Thank you for sharing that. That's a very, very powerful perspective when it comes to particularly kind of the training, the CrossFit, the functional fitness, the athlete, the high achiever community. I think that it certainly is a noble pursuit to do hard things physically, to overcome challenges, to chase challenging things, to do hard workouts on a daily basis or like daily micro masogis of sorts that are kind of crucibles for transformation for people. But there is a certain element where that is transformation by addition rather than by subtraction. And honestly, I think it's easier. It is easier to add in something new that is very challenging and can be very, very hard. You get a pretty immediate chemical and hormonal boost and response from that. You feel better physically, you feel better cognitively, you feel better emotionally if you go do a hard workout or you do a hard
Yeah,
challenge.
this was not that. Like everything that Marcus had said in that podcast was true. You lose seemingly all sense of time. It's almost like it's hard to explain. It's almost like you enter this fifth dimension. You lose track of time. The world gets just quiet, quiet. All you hear is your own breath and your own thoughts. That's it.
Yeah. Yeah, growth. Yeah, what's just coming to mind now as I hear you talk about it is growth by subtraction versus addition. What is it that you need to remove that is eliminating your opportunities for growth versus what do you need to add that will help kind of be a catalyst for growth? And I think we are willing to grow through addition versus subtraction, even to the point of, can I add enough things that offset the things I don't want to get rid of? We hear that all the time, kind of in our context inside of gyms and with folks that we would work with is, I want to do this so that I can do that. And I can do that is not so I can live with vitality for the rest of my life or so that I can go do X, Y, or Z. It's so I can eat whatever I want. And I think we brush that off as like, oh, that's funny. It's not funny though, because it's still such a controlling mechanism in that person's psychology and that person's life. And what came to mind as you were sharing that is a lot of either stoicism or a lot of Paul's writing, even in the New Testament, where he talks about like whether with a lot or with a little, he's learned to be content, or very particularly when he speaks about being mastered by nothing and how much that connects with even just kind of like the stoic philosophies of, it's not really ever about the thing, it's about your need for the thing, about your dependency on the thing. And the man who's truly free is the man who's learned to master himself. And I imagine that's the cave you wandered into and the dragon you slayed through or began the process of slaying through this 40-day fast. What were there other kind of benchmark days that you can remember? Like day 23 was crazy versus day 27 was I was on a high. Did it ebb and flow
Mm,
like that at all, or was it all just
sort of.
okay?
Up until I don't know how it is for everybody, but I know how it was for me. It was pretty gnarly. When I say gnarly, I mean like you get to like day 4 or 5 and you just feel sick. You just feel disgusting, and that's when glucose is switching to ketones as that primary fuel source. And your body goes through all kinds of just weird things, but it wasn't until I got to around that day 17 through 20, right in there, where all the noise, all the, distractions, the wanting to go on Instagram and look at recipes and dreaming about like, oh, that looks good. Like that was how I was passing my time. And that was when everything just kind of switched off. It just became so mechanical. There wasn't any more feeling in terms of like food or desire or anything. It just got off. Update. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I hope that makes sense. It's just,
No, it does. Yeah.
it
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
just void.
Yeah. What was day 40 like? And how did you decide it was the end?
Day 40, I was a mess, like a literal ball of emotional mess. One, because I actually did it. And, you're talking about, you're defying a biological need to survive when you do this. Like, you're supposed to eat. So,
Yeah.
so you're consciously denying yourself what you need to survive. And there was a lot of things that were happening, like my blood pressure it was getting low, like really low. I would get up and use the restroom and come back and I could feel it was just it like I knew that I like enough is enough. So I was elated, but I was also like, I don't want to do anymore.
And in that process, through kind of the emotional, mental, even spiritual experience that you were having, do you feel like the kind of elevation or the growth of your mentality, your mindset, going from that whatever hierarchy you would want to use, but the leveled up aspect of your mindset and your perspective, is that what you feel like positioned you to share this content of book 2 with the right motivation and the right desire, is because of the transformation that you went through in that?
I think so. I had to go through what was kind of happening in parallel when I say that just the world got quiet. The only thing I was thinking about was essentially the components of what was in that book. And it took a lot of internal work of separating events from people, something that I believed in, this methodology from people. It was doing the work. And, all of a sudden I had all this time to do it. So I felt like it was just the right time. It's interesting because that's almost a two-pronged question because I didn't come out of the fast. So like on day 41, I was like, wow, the sky had opened. It was more like everything that I went into that fast, essentially praying about and seeking answers to, it got piecemeal to me when the fast was over. It was like all of a sudden I'd be sitting in the living room and I'd have a thought and I'm like, oh my gosh, like I just put that together. Like something finally just made sense or clicked or and so over the next well, it's still happening. So over the next couple months, it was just a little bit here, a little bit here, connecting this dot, connecting this dot. And over time, like you get a much bigger picture that's filled with a lot more grace.
Mm, that's so good. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, let's chat a little bit about book two. And as we do, I know that from knowing you to the degree that even I do, and the initial conversations we've had about this, I know that your intent or motivation in sharing this is that it is not a criticism or a hit piece on anything that it is talking about. So what is your through that framing and that lens of being very gracious, but also being very convicted in your desire to share your experiences because you think that they have value to others? What is kind of your hope as people explore the journey that you lay out in book two?
So I would say that book two has three pillars and it uses all of the experiences seemingly like not so good, but it uses these experiences and that's where these things are learned from and those it's value, it's worth and identity.
Mm,
And possibly, what some of the dangers can be when we attach any of these things to something externally outside of ourselves and what can happen when we do that.
If you've been listening to the show for a while, you know that we take protein seriously, between zero point 0.7 and 1 gram per pound of body weight every single day. That is the goal. David protein bars are one of the ways I actually hit that without loading up on sugar or empty calories. David has two bars. It's a gold bar and a bronze bar. I love both of them, and both have the best macros that you'll find. Gold has 28 grams of protein, 150 calories, zero sugar. That's 75% of calories from protein. That's the highest ratio of any leading bar on the market. Doughy texture, satisfying chunks. The chocolate chip cookie dough and the blueberry pie are my go-tos. The bronze bar, 20 grams of protein, 150 calories, still zero sugar, smooth marshmallow base, chocolate coating, serious crunch. The s'mores chocolate crunch is what I would recommend. So whether I'm coming off a training session or bridging the gap between lunch and dinner, this is the bar I reach for. High protein, low calories, no compromises on taste. Don't just take my word for it. Try it for yourself. Buy 4 cartons, get the 5th one free at davidprotein.com/excellence. That's davidprotein.com/excellence. When we started this here show, Chasing Excellence, it felt like every day introduced a new decision that needed an answer. It still kind of feels like that. How do we get in front of people? Where does everything live? How does any of this work? There are a lot of hats you don't expect to wear when you start something new. For millions of businesses, Shopify is the tool that makes all of that manageable. Shopify is the commerce platform behind 10% of all e-commerce in the US, from household names to brands just getting started. Hundreds of ready-to-use templates so you can build the store that matches your brand and your dream. AI tools that write product descriptions, polish copy, and enhance your photos. Award-winning 24/7 customer support so you're never figuring it out all by yourself. Inventory, payments, analytics, shipping, everything all in one place, so you spend less time managing platforms and more time building what you started. You can start your own business today with the best partner in the game if you sign up for your $1 per month trial at shopify.com/excellence. Shopify.com/excellence. That's Shopify.com/excellence. We are refinishing our basement into a family room this summer as we speak. It's a project we've been planning for a little bit now. And because of it, it's the first time in a while that we had to get really, really intentional about our finances. And we are grateful that we had Monarch on our side. Monarch is the personal finance app that tracks everything: accounts, investments, savings goals, and spending. You can get your first year of Monarch Core for half off, just $50 with the promo code Excellence. Here's what I love. It doesn't just show you what you've already spent. It helps you see whether you're on track for what actually matters. We asked Monarch's AI assistant, can we do this project without touching our savings? And it answered with our actual data, cash flow, savings rate, where spending had quietly crept up. Most apps tell you what happened. Monarch helps you plan for what is coming. Use the code Excellence at monarch.com to get your first year of Monarch Core half off at just $50. That's 50% off your first year of Monarch Core at monarch.com with the code Excellence.
I'm assuming this is at the very beginning of the book. This is one of the first excerpts you shared
Okay, let's see.
from it. And it sounds like this takes us directly from the events of kind of book one in that 2020 timeframe to right after that. And so you titled
Oh,
this one the counter.
yep.
And so I'm just going to read it. And then what I would love is, what is the lesson to learn from this? And what do you hope people would take away from it? Okay. So the counter. The women in that morning class were my heroes. I admired everything about them and wanted to be just like them. I had just gotten back from appearing on the CrossFit podcast, and a few weeks later, I had taken my level 1 at the ranch, which for those who don't know is kind of like origin location for CrossFit. I walked in that morning so full I could barely contain it. I had missed everyone and I couldn't wait to tell them everything. There's a big counter just inside the door. You can't see the floor from the entrance, but you can hear everything. I set my bag down and I could hear them. The same goofy morning chatter I had missed, my people, my family. And then I heard my name, and then I heard the laughing. I wonder what Athena is going to be doing today for her big CrossFit career. And the laughter exploded. I stood there behind that counter for just a moment. Then I walked around it and I stood in front of them. My eyes were already swelling. Two of them looked directly at me and looked away. I knew in that moment what was coming. Leaving was going to be inevitable, and it was going to be one of the most painful things I had ever done.
Yeah. That first place that I was at, that's who all these people become. They become your family.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I also know, just based on my own family, that we are all perfectly imperfect.
Mm,
And even your family can let you down.
mm,
But I do know that you can't stay someplace that's going to hold you back. And so, even though they were my family, and even though, that was where I started this whole thing, I think I also intuitively knew at the time. It was hard to process some of that because when you're grieving, you don't always understand why you're grieving. But I think if I had stayed, I would never have become a coach. I would have been perfectly happy just coming in, doing my thing, being a member, and
mm.
stayed under the coach that I was under, and everything would have been great. It takes like something happening to push you into a really uncomfortable situation where you take that leap. And sometimes you're not taking it because you believe in yourself. You're taking it because there's lack of option.
Mm,
This is going to be the next step, and you're going to jump whether you're ready or not, is what happened.
yeah. How did you remove your feelings about kind of that environment and that community at large, and even from those people from that particular kind of isolated experience that you had?
Well, initially, I had to go block everybody. Like, that sounds really immature, but I had to just take it out of view, out of sight, out of mind for a little bit while. It took a while. And again, it's processing over time. Did it feel good right away? No, it felt terrible. Like, it feels like a betrayal. So it took time. And it wasn't really until I opened up my own affiliate and then being able to look back and say, these little dynamics are going to happen. And at first I thought it was they were making fun of me because I wanted to be a coach, but it took me a long time to understand that that wasn't what it was. It was Athena was the one that was getting all the attention. They had just done a documentary and they flew her out to California to go on the podcast. And then she's getting to go hang out at the ranch. Like, I think it was just pure,
Mhm.
they didn't get to do
Sure.
it.
Yeah, which is the right perspective, I think, almost in all contexts, is whenever we find ourselves in positions of being offended by other people, it's if we can kind of elevate our perspective, remove ourselves from the scenario and look at it through their lens of why, knowing wholeheartedly that you are not an ill-willed evil person, what would be the motivation for why would you say something like that? And that's obviously so hard and what feels like nearly impossible to do in the moment. But it's like we get so offended as if, do you know of the empty boat theory? Have you heard that?
I have.
Okay. It's like I feel like it's that, the concept is simple of like we just assume people are all in their boats rowing intentionally into one another.
Yeah.
And so this boat bumps into our boat and we turn around ready to be all pissed off and then we realize like, oh, that boat's empty.
Why'd you hit me? Yeah.
Yeah, right.
What are you
And
doing?
it's like, oh, it's just even whenever the offense is directed at us, it's almost never actually about us.
True. Yeah.
And I think the negative or the immature response to that is often like, well, you're just jealous. And then it puts us back in a position where it's us versus them. When in reality, the way
Mhm.
I think you have responded to this and the way that you share so many of your experiences, there is no us versus them.
Right.
It's all just us. And it's us in our own individual journeys. We're all just bumping into each other sometimes.
Uh-huh.
But how can I respond really graciously as that conflict arises, while at the same time not giving it permission to continue to limit your growth or your own experiences? And so I think your response to that of like, okay, like, yes, be gracious, and yes, forgive, and yes, be empathetic and understanding, and also leave, because that's the action step you needed to take.
I think one of the biggest things that's changed through all of this, and I think that this is where I was finally able to start writing about this stuff, is the concept of both can be true. So
Yeah.
you can have all these terrible experiences and also know that at the heart of it, these people, was the intent to be evil? No. Back to the boat thing, right? Like both can be true. You can be horribly hurt by something. You don't have to like hide from the fact that something hurts you tremendously.
Hmm.
And that sometimes I beat myself up, like maybe I'm too sensitive and maybe I'm just
Sure.
taking this too personally. Like I allowed myself to say, it hurt me.
Yeah.
And it's okay that it hurt.
Hmm. Yeah. And I think oftentimes the hardest part of growth and change and transformation is other people letting you, because they have a picture of you, right? And everybody is passionate about the initial steps of like changing your life for the better until it becomes a challenge for them as well.
Yes.
I've experienced that a number of times where your own ability to kind of overcome your own, we'll just call them vices, and find a new, better way to live is an invitation for other people to consider that it's possible for them to do the same. And maybe they don't want to.
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and it's easier to be like, to point fingers rather than to receive kind of appropriate levels of challenge that says, oh my gosh, look at what Athena has done and is continuing to do. When the appropriate thing should be, the appropriate response to that should be what you're hoping for, which is kind of inspiration of, look at this story, it's possible for you. But that also requires hard decisions on their part that maybe they're
It's
not ready to
it's
make.
not gonna come from this isn't gonna be one of those things where they pick up and read it. Like it requires like the work.
Mm,
It doesn't
yeah. Right.
like when somebody hurts you, I think it's a very natural response. You know, like I would be lying if I said, hey, if somebody walked over and slapped me, I wish I could be like Jesus and turn the other
Hmm.
cheek, but that's not my first reaction. My first reaction is I'm going to well up my fist and be like, let's take this outside. That's how I feel. But the work is why did he do it? Why would he want to do that? Is there any other possibility than the one that the story I'm telling in my head on why this might have happened? But that takes a long time.
It does. And it also takes intentional
It does.
micro or macro experiences like your 40-day fast to put yourself in a position that makes you more of a self aware, self developed human being that can be prepared in those times, because you had no idea what you were going to walk into that
No,
morning.
no.
And it maybe is a bit of an over dramatized language for the situation, but we talk about the differences between like peacetime and wartime.
Mhm.
And kind of emotionally, that was a wartime moment
Oh,
for you
yeah.
to walk in and have that experience. And the way that you determine how you're going to respond to that in wartime is through these peace times
Mhm.
where you have the
That's
actual
true.
time, space, and ability to do so. I think people just expect, like, yeah, when that stuff happens, I'm just going to accept whatever my natural human response is. And that's like almost the surest way to ruin most of your relationships and your
Right,
life.
right.
Is
It's
like,
true.
do whatever you feel in the moment is
Mhm.
kind of the worst possible way to respond to things. So I think it does take things like, whether you ever share it or not, sit down and write a
Mhm.
journal of your
Mhm.
experiences
Yeah.
and begin to process and then go through these very like growth by addition or growth by subtraction experiences like your 40-day fast,
Yeah.
and put yourself in that position that really elevates you as a person to be prepared for those challenges in those moments. And at the same time recognizing that what has been my experience is that sometimes the hardest part of your own transformation is other people allowing you to be different. than you used to be. And, you got to be gracious about that too. Give
Catching people
people
off guard because you just said something really interesting. So I want to say that I was out of the fast a couple weeks and I get this DM and it said something along the lines of like you have a different vibe now and bring back the scaling instruction and you're the scaling coach and blah blah blah. And I remember sitting there and I was like,
lock you in a
wow,
box.
yeah,
Yeah.
wow, okay. I mean, but it was interesting because they follow you for a specific reason, and at any point, if that changes, it was just interesting that you said that. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that is definitely the game to be played. We've talked about that with some of the folks on the team here at the gym, as well as like with comp train and such. You're not for everyone. No one is for everyone.
No.
But the name of the game is basically trying to get very, very clear about who you're for. And as a business or as a brand, that's fine. That's marketing 101 is product market fit. Be very clear about your singular message. But I'm a person, not a brand.
Right.
And so like I'm not willing to play that game. And so what I am willing to share is the only thing I feel like I am a developing expert on is my own experiences in my own life. And
Right.
I'm willing to share that with you. And if that's helpful for you, because maybe you want to live a similar life and experience similar things in your own way, like I want to be an open book about both kind of the fall and the rise and the process to get to these places. But like,
Hmm.
yeah, man, I'm not just gonna sit in a single box or in a single niche and kind of cater to consumerism in that way. And I think like that's probably what you're experiencing here is what people expect from you is no, 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 you're the I was 500 pounds and I've lost well over 200 pounds and I teach other people how to do the same. And I
Hmm.
don't follow you for you to tell me how to think differently. I
Right.
don't follow you for you to tell me how to
That's
challenge my
right.
perspectives,
That's right. Yeah. I'm
And
getting a lot of that.
yeah, but you're a person and you are allowed to evolve. And that is actually what people need the most is that. So, okay, next excerpt. This one I imagine is a bit later in your journey, particularly in kind of relationship and dynamic with, I assume, CrossFit HQ at the time. So this one is the gap. Sounds like a kind of
Oh,
an interaction had at a restaurant, maybe.
right.
Yeah. Okay. So the gap. I was at dinner with someone high up in the organization. Somewhere in the conversation, they mentioned that when they were out to dinner and saw someone eating badly at a restaurant, they deliberately gave that person dirty looks. That was their way of helping. I thought about everyone I had ever known who needed CrossFit the most, who had been desperate and ashamed and looking for a door. What it felt like to carry shame you couldn't name, to feel those looks without knowing where they were coming from, and to wonder if you imagined something that was entirely real. You don't know anything about them, I said. You don't know their story. And then they looked at me. Athena, we're not talking about you. We know you're working your ass off. I nodded and never said anything. But I never forgot the gap between what got publicly said and what happened across a restaurant when nobody was watching. That gap was the first thing I couldn't fill, and it wouldn't be the last.
Yeah.
What's the lesson in that?
The lesson that I was definitely trying to illustrate to this person that day is it came across as so matter of fact. They would look over at somebody and was presented like, yeah, like we make it a game. We make sure that we do it wherever we go. And just that by itself to me was
Mm,
like, you do this for fun. And so I couldn't even get past the why did you even say it, let alone what they were trying to accomplish with it. But I think that this was multi-pronged. The first level is what on earth would possess you to turn this into a game? The second prong was when you see someone that just happens to be in a restaurant eating something, like, what do you know about them? Like,
mm,
what if this is actually a different lesson in the book, different context, but very similar thing. And that's can you tell just by looking at somebody where they're at right now? Or you automatically making assumptions. What if that person was eating a piece of cake right there? What if they were celebrating the fact that they had just lost 300 pounds, but for some reason,
mm.
because they weren't where you thought they should be, they
Yeah.
didn't look like they'd lost. I mean, what does that look like? unless you know them, you wouldn't know.
Yeah.
So it was just this confusion. And then the last thing of it was crossing of an ethics line for me.
Hmm.
You're out there, you've got the t-shirt on, it's got the logo, you're telling people, get off the couch and get into the gym, but you're going to shame them in there, knowing that shame is never going to work. And so every single time from now on, that person is going to look at that brand and think those people are horrible. And I think what was even more surprising is how fast it came. And then there's one more part in that, and this is something that I struggled with my whole life, is understanding innately what a dirty look feels like because you've gotten so many. You know when somebody's giving you a dirty look. Most of the time they make it pretty obvious. It's something hard to explain, but you just know what it is. And as much as I love to explain it away, and I always try to be strong and saying, maybe they were thinking about something hard in that moment, and I just happened to be looking at them wrong. They had this weird look on their face. You know how we misinterpret looks all the time, and you try to talk yourself out of it. And I guess the point there is that sometimes it's the truth, and we're trying to gaslight ourselves like this is not happening.
Hmm.
So there was a lot of prongs with that one.
Yeah. I think all those are extremely powerful to consider for ourselves. And I mean, I think that's really the objective of people who do work like yours and put out content and share things. Ideally, it's so that the kind of reader or the consumer finds themselves in the
Hmm.
story
Hmm.
and goes, okay, I've had these experiences. How do I respond better to these experiences? Regardless of which character I am, whether
Hmm.
I'm the person walking in the restaurant giving the bad looks or whether I'm
Hmm.
the one receiving. How do I respond better and kind of evolve my approach here? And the middle thing that you just shared there is where I find myself in it, which is I have such convictions and things that I'm so passionate about that when other people don't share them, I have recognized that it's almost standard operating procedure for me to almost condemn them for not sharing. And I think hopefully I have matured or grown in a way that people don't know that. That's like an initial like, oh, that's stupid. I need to not think about it that way. But you're doing a thing that I disagree with, and so therefore that makes you a bad person.
Right.
Are not automatic thoughts I have anymore, but I definitely can look at stages or seasons of my life where I have been in that position
Oh, yeah.
of you do something different than I do it, and I see it as part of this like very complex problem that the whole world is experiencing because you're sitting there eating highly processed, high sugar foods. And now I don't just think you're making a bad decision. I also don't like you. And that's just like so silly when what I have said actually matters to me is helping people discover what it means to feel better and live better lives, to live a better way. And I'm essentially walking around as the person kind of practicing those habits that are supposed to yield those results. But if you look at me and I'm the person walking across the restaurant with a scowl on my face, how
Right.
compelling is that? Like nobody wants that.
Exactly my point, right? Like
Yeah,
what
right.
you thought you were sending them a message, but it's not going to come across to them the way that you intended.
Mhm,
I assure you,
absolutely. Yeah.
it doesn't inspire them.
Yeah, looking at somebody who is living a life of, like, joy and contentment and vitality and fulfillment, and if you're at a table at a restaurant and you see somebody eating healthy foods who has a relatively fit body composition and seems like they're just filled with just all of this life and all of this joy, maybe then you're looking and going like, "Hmm, that seems interesting. I wonder what they do."
Right.
You know? And it's just we have such a responsibility to carry the message with integrity.
Thank you.
And
Well said.
yeah, and I think I've experienced the opposite of that, where I think I if you remove even just like relational interaction from the equation for me, I made training such a component of my identity that there's no way people were looking at it and going like, "Oh yeah, that looks good. I want to do that." Because it
Mhm.
was a replacement of who I was, not actually like an elevation of who I was.
Totally.
Wasn't really making my life better. It was just replacing my life.
Mhm.
You know, I do. I just think that's what that kind of convicted in me was, as I read that, is the continued necessity to steward really well this thing that I do think matters so
That's
much.
right.
And the way that for me, that is just fitness and that's health and that's vitality. And that is challenging yourself to do hard things physically, mentally, and emotionally so that you are prepared to live your best life and to be the best version of yourself, to lead and care for other people. And as I read that, that's really what that challenge to me is, how can I make sure that these even just like nuanced and very minimal moments are things that would make people compelled to ask, hey, what do you do? Rather than like, screw that guy and everything he does. I am not interested.
It was kinda like, the words of Chuck Carswell constantly echo in my brain, and he does this thing, is like, "Care, care, care," and that day was like, "If it's not
It's
care,
not it. Yeah. Right.
not it."
This episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. Summer sounds amazing in theory, and then school gets out, the schedule disappears, and suddenly you're managing kids, work, workouts, and everything else all at the same time. I love summer with my boys, but there is a version that feels like thriving and a version that feels like white knuckling it until September comes back. What makes the difference is whether you've actually built time for yourself. If you've struggled with that in the past, well, therapy can help you understand what you need, where your limits are, and how to say no without the guilt. BetterHelp makes it easy to get that kind of support. Over 30,000 fully licensed therapists, an average rating of 4.9 out of 5 across more than 1.7 million client reviews. All you got to do is fill out a short questionnaire. They'll match you with a therapist. And if it's not a right fit, you switch. No friction, no issues. You don't have to say yes to everything this summer, but you might want to say yes to therapy because that's where you can find the support you need. Sign up and get 10% off at betterhelp.com/excellence. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/excellence. We are brought to you by Momentous. You know how nutrition goes. There's always something new, quote unquote new, always something everybody's talking about. We've spent lots of time collectively thinking about protein, and rightly so, but there's a shift happening now. It's an important one. We are starting to really understand how fundamental fiber is to everything else we're trying to do. Here's the problem though, nearly 95% of people are not getting enough of it. That's why Momentous created Fiber Plus. It's a triple action formula that combines soluble and insoluble fiber with prebiotic resistant starch to support gut health and digestion, help your body absorb nutrients better, stabilize blood sugar, and improve recovery. And unlike most fiber products, which are single source and full of gut disrupting additives, Momentous used real cinnamon bark and kept everything clean, minimal, and NSF certified for sport. Better gut function makes everything else you're doing more effective. That is the idea. That is why we take it. Support your gut health and overall performance with Momentous Fiber Plus and get up to 35% off your entire first order at livemomentous.com when you use the promo code excellence. That's livemomentous.com, promo code excellence. I love the morning ritual of a hot drink, the smell, the warmth, the few minutes before the house wakes up. Oh, I love it so much. What I didn't love was the caffeine dependency and how hard the afternoon hit when it actually wore off. Mud water can fix that. I've got the OG blend here at the house: cacao, chai, turmeric, functional mushrooms. It's warm, it's grounding, it's like a spiced hot cocoa that actually does something useful. It's got about 1/7 of the caffeine of coffee, enough to feel clear and focused, but not wired, steadier energy, no spiral, no issues at night. The starter kit is the best way in. You get a full-size tin of your chosen blend, whether OG, coffee, matcha, or turmeric, plus a free rechargeable frother, free gifts, and some free shipping, of course. If you are ready to make the switch to cleaner energy, go to mudwater.com/excellence. Grab the starter kit, use the code excellence for 43% off. The frother alone, I'm not lying, is worth it. That's up to 43% off with the code excellence at mudwtr.com. After your purchase, they'll ask how you found them. Please let them know that we sent you. Mudwater.com.
I love you brought Chuck up. I love Chuck. I've had great experiences with Chuck in my years throughout kind of exposure to the CrossFit space. And I think that's interesting because the last piece I'll share, and we'll wrap it up here, is an expert where you talk about kind of putting people on a pedestal.
Yeah.
And it's a bit longer, so bear with it. But I think it's really important because it connects, I think, to the deeper kind of reasoning and heart behind this whole book, and frankly also the purpose of this podcast series, which is exactly what you have just said, which is integrity and identity. And I find it very interesting for you to have had many tough, harsh, negative experiences inside of a very specific ecosystem and inside of a very specific community, and you are still not committed to the dogmatic nature of that, thing or that
Yeah,
community, but you are committed to how it can change the world. You have been able to separate your kind of negative experiences and the people who maybe didn't have the integrity that they should have from the thing itself.
that's right.
That is a wildly powerful tool that can
Wow.
be used.
A lot of work.
I'll read this last piece and then let us know your thoughts and kind of hopes for this section as far as what people would get out of it. Okay, you titled this one "No Gods Here." In CrossFit, there is an unspoken promise. If I can just master my body, I can master my life. If I suffer enough, I will become bulletproof. We build them in every corner of this sport. We give them a platform, a following, a kind of authority that starts to feel like something more than expertise. They become the proof that the system works. We don't just admire them, we outsource our salvation to them. I paid to be in a room with one of these gods once. I showed up believing that they held a key I was missing. And by that evening, they were slurring their words. Staggering in front of a room, the smell of alcohol hanging in the air, I looked around, waiting for an intervention, but nobody blinked. The room just kept humming along. Because if anyone, including myself, admitted our hero was falling apart, the illusion would shatter for all of us. Saving the myth became more important than saving the man. My struggle was my weight. It was visible, judged often. His armor was perfect, so the room looked away. But watching him stagger, something in me died. Because if the elite, untouchable God is still fundamentally broken, it means no amount of thrusters or squats can cure the human condition. That is a terrifying thing to realize in a room full of people trying to outrun their pain. But for me, it was the moment I stopped looking up from the floor. My brokenness was no worse than his. The ground is level here. It always was. When the pedestal cracks, you have to grieve the fantasy you bought into. There are no gods here, just humans dealing with human things. Your heroes don't have to be villains for the pedestal to cost you something. They just have to be human, and God help us, they always are.
So I think it wasn't the first time that something like this had happened where, like I call it the fallen hero. It's a theme throughout the book. And it was, it's like the toy soldiers, one by one they fall. And I think there's multiple painful realizations, at least for me, is feeling like I contributed to that because you have two sides. You have the person who admires and puts people up on a pedestal because you believe that they're infallible. They must have something that you don't have. And you're like, whether that's through persona or social media or whatever that is, but also sometimes because we put them up there the way that we do, they absorb that and then it becomes who they are. They also in turn believe
Yeah.
I'm doing the hard things.
Yeah. It's a bit
I'm
unfair to them
okay.
as
Right.
well. Yeah.
So I think it was when I say that there was a part of me that died, I think it was the realization that nobody, nobody, Athena, is coming down from the mountain fully cured. Nobody.
Yeah.
And it was like, whatever it is that you're looking for, it's not that you can't go to these things and learn things from people. It's not that people don't have expertise or that we can all learn from one another. It's where you put them, thinking
Mm,
that you also don't have equal value in the room, that they have a missing key somehow, and that's not it.
mm.
They just have experience in a different area, but that doesn't make them untouchable.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that they're not going to struggle with their own stuff. And I think the second part to that, really quick, was the realization that maybe by doing that, putting people on pedestals the way that we seem to do, how much pressure that could cause them, only because I experienced it myself. They think that, hey, you're the success story. You should be able to now you got to maintain it. And if you revert or fall back or if something happens,
Mm.
that's so much pressure. And then I wondered, like, does that pressure, is that what drives that kind of behavior? Is the pressure. So there was so much humanity in it.
Yeah, it certainly could. I mean, it's kind of the age old perspective that pressure and or power doesn't build character, it reveals it.
Mhm.
And I think that's true to an extent. I also think that when you face times of pressure, it is an opportunity to form and reform your
Mhm,
character
mhm, mhm.
to some degree. So I think it's like what you said earlier. It's like yes, and both can be true at the same time. But yeah, when I read that, I mean, the thing that just resonates so heavily with me, particularly because it's a bias, is something I'm very passionate about, which comes from what we talked about earlier, which is I am passionate about talking about the thing I wish people talked to me about because it's what I needed,
Right.
which is just this formation of identity being very foundational to like identity is irrespective of circumstance, it's irrespective of anything. As our values and convictions and principles, those are all irrespective of anything that is surrounds you externally, like you talked about earlier. So I read that and it's just like, yes, reinforce that, reinforce that, reinforce that, while at the same time recognizing like I want to steward things in a way that something like that would never have to be written about me. At the same time, it's already too late. I've already been there, to some degree in some ways. Preaching the gospel or preaching the message, I can't quite perfectly execute.
Well, I just said this to somebody yesterday, as a matter of fact. It's like, there was a post about, and I don't remember who said it, but it was basically this concept of we should try and be the standard ourselves first before we ask other people to bear some kind of standard. But my response to that was yes, and that's important. But I think that we need to recognize that while we try to develop our character and to be people of integrity, that we're going to do it human, not godlike, human, which means we're going to mess up. And there's grace in that. So
Yeah.
it's not that we can't learn from people, or it's not really about that experience, and it wasn't even about the alcohol. It was more like
Mm.
we all struggle. We're all striving basically for the same things, and we're all going to do it imperfectly.
Yeah, and I think from that particular experience, what comes to mind is what you referenced with the 40-day fast of being physically elite in terms of whatever arbitrary metrics we want to put onto that. Being physically elite is one thing. Being mentally durable, being mentally unbreakable, being mentally, for lack of better terms, elite is available to almost all of us. And you do begin with biology. I think I'm very heavily convicted. I have a very heavy belief that starting with your body is oftentimes one of the easiest places to begin when it comes to kind of mastering yourself and self-discipline and self-control and temperance and those things. But there's a difference between being fit and being free. And I think what you say there in terms of no amount of thrusters or burpees can cure the human condition, there is a strong possibility that you are just you as in anyone is enslaved to something. You are controlled by something. And that could be an ism or a vice or something in those regards, or maybe your own insecurity. And you are enslaved to that story you're telling, and you're enslaved to that substance, you're enslaved to that thing. And you're one of the fittest, by some definitions, human beings on the planet. Well, that doesn't make you free. It just makes you a fitter slave. That's not really the way that we want anybody living.
Well, it's not only that too, but it's like this. Sometimes I feel, which is one of the reasons that I do what I do, is this moral hierarchy of my sin is not as good as your sin, or your sin is worse than mine. If we just take the vice of alcohol versus the vice of somebody that overeats and has obesity, are is one better than the other? Somehow
Sure.
it's, but sometimes one is just easier to hide. That's all it means.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I also think that those are almost the easy ones to go to because they're just easy to understand and comprehend, and they are visible to some degree, whether that is being overweight, obese, or staggering due to consume an overconsumption of
Extreme,
alcohol.
right.
Yeah, those are the more extreme ones versus like, man, if you're in the gym and I'm in the gym, as you say in this, like the ground is level. And whether you can do 10 burpees in a minute and I can do 20 doesn't matter. The ground is level. And frankly, the way in which we challenge ourselves physically is really just like our own current threshold and crucible for growth and transformation. So I should be challenging myself. You should be challenging yourself. Someone should be challenging themselves at their own level of relative challenge that is all equal. The ground is level even there. And maybe the outcomes are a 6-inch plate jump versus a 24-inch box jump, but the challenge is the same. And the growth that occurs because you are choosing to challenge yourself in that way are the same. And so even this elitist mentality of like, because I can jump on a higher box than you, it makes me better.
Yeah.
In some performance metrics, that is objective, sure, but that's not what we're talking about, and that's not really the value, and that's not the aim. And I think that that's what you get at in all of these kind of excerpts. And I am going to assume kind of the entirety of the book is this idea that like your journey is your journey, and it has value, and it is equally challenging, irrespective of what somebody else is doing in their journey. And you can learn from, be inspired by, be challenged by, be motivated by other people's journeys, but yours is not theirs and theirs is not yours. And I think it's just so valuable. Yeah. So I guess maybe my last question as it relates to this is you've had these experiences, these three that we've shared briefly here are somewhat negative, they're difficult.
Oh, yeah.
And all of these have happened inside of the context of the same community, if you will. I think that there is a tendency inside of this community to look at people like you talk about here in that last excerpt as like the messiahs of the
Oh, yeah.
methodology.
Yeah.
You know, messiah being like the savior, the
Right.
deliverer, the leader
Right.
of the specific cause or the movement.
Hmm.
But you are still such an advocate for this methodology in particular, for CrossFit, for what it can do for people's lives. And I think it's amazing. How have you kind of eliminated that messiah complex to go, it's just not even about the people? And yes, it would be better if those people at the top would choose to represent it with maybe more integrity and alignment, but it's just not the point. And so, how have you practiced that separation so that you can continue to be committed to this right and good thing without it being kind of tainted by people's inability to lead it well?
I'm going to be perfectly honest and say I don't think that part was intentional. I think
Mm,
it was a direct reaction of having to go through these multiple, this range that's in the book, and finding the commonality. And the commonality was like you're putting all of this onto other people, thinking they're the ones that know everything, and suddenly your struggle is somehow, you're failing. There's something that you're just not getting. There's something about you, when it was really like, wow, like I'm just a human like everybody else. And like what I think once you take people down, one, you I'm not saying it's always possible, but when you pull people down, I'm sorry, I feel like I'm angelic right now because the light coming
no,
through
it's
my
good.
window. Um,
It fits the theme well. Yeah.
you can't have real relationship with people if you're looking. You can only have real relationships with people when you're looking eye to eye, and that's where relationships happen. It was just having to work through one at a time and just coming to this realization that people are gonna people no matter what, but it doesn't change the thing that I love. People are gonna come and go. People are gonna do people things.
Yeah. That's awesome. You can't have true relationships while you're looking up, and you have to be looking eye to eye, which means you also can't have true relationships if you are navel gazing and just looking down at the ground in your own sense of insecurity. And I think that is in these pieces I have read in these conversations with you, I think that is what I hope to be a powerful takeaway for yourself, that this experience you've had with these 40 days, this experience you've had through writing the second book is like no more staring at the ground, no more looking at your feet, no more navel gazing. Like the ground is level and like people need what you have to offer.
Thank you.
That's my hope, obviously, for you. As I hope for everybody who reads this is like, what do I have to offer? And how, of course, do I look at people who have gone before and be motivated, inspired to learn from those people, to
I
be
mean, the
empowered by those
knowledge,
people.
we're not talking about knowledge, what somebody knows, but what somebody knows can also be learned by you. Like again,
Yeah.
there's nothing
Yeah.
special. It's not
Yeah,
like
sure.
they have a
Sure.
magic key. Everything
Yeah.
available to them is also available to you. And that's the part that's like that's what takes us the longest to think, wow, I can know all those things too. I can behave in these ways too. Whatever that is for you, whatever that God, that Messiah is, can also,
Mhm.
you can possess all of the qualities that you appreciate without putting somebody so high up where they're not level anymore.
Mm. Oh, it's so good. I knew that for myself, one of the things that I wanted that I had written down in my own kind of personal journey was I didn't want to live any more days of my life wishing I was someone besides myself. In some ways, like not through arrogance, like I wanted to be my own favorite person.
Right.
And I had just recognized like I was doing exactly what you just said. Like, look at all of these people. I want their life. I want their ability. I want
I
their
mean, it's so easy
capability.
for us to do. We do it on
Yeah.
social media all
Yeah.
the time.
All the time. Yeah.
So,
That's so powerful. It's so good in terms of, I suppose if I were to take one thing away,
yeah.
there are many things I would take away from this conversation, from conversations with you, and from the things you've written. But it really is agency. Like that's kind of the what I hear in these conversations that I would hope somebody would walk away from is what do you want?
Mhm.
You can do that. It's on the other side of you choosing to
That's
take
right.
agency over your own life.
That's right.
And it's so frustratingly simple. And on the other side of so much hard work, like 40 days of fasting and
Yeah.
constant compounding behaviors. But truly, maybe it just starts with you actually can do it.
Yeah.
And you just have to take the agency over your life to do it. That's powerful. Okay.
Yeah.
When is book 2 coming out?
Later this fall.
Okay. Awesome. People would find it on your website?
You'll be able to find it on the website, Amazon, Barnes and Noble. It'll be everywhere.
Awesome. Well, I'm excited for it to come out, excited to read it when it does, maybe have a larger conversation about it
Yeah. Would love
at
that.
that point in time. Yeah. So we'll link Athena's website. It's athenaimperez.com, I
That's it.
think. Yeah. Yeah. So we'll link that in the show notes as well as other resources for Athena. But before we wrap up, Athena, we do the question chain.
Okay.
So you don't know who the next guest is,
Okay.
but you were leaving a question for them to answer.
Okay. What's a lesson that you've learned over the last 10 years that you've had to learn the hard way?
Hmm.
What's the most valuable lesson you've learned in the last 10 years that you had to learn the hard
Yeah, it'll be a great conversation starter. I'm glad you took the time to do that. That's like basically it either sets the whole episode up for success or failure. So it's
way?
important. It's awesome. All right, Athena, we will share your info in the show notes. Thanks for the work you do. And thanks for chatting, and we'll talk soon.
Thanks, Jameson. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you so much for being here. Two quick things before you go. First, the 531 listener guide for this episode is in the show notes. 5 big ideas, 3 reflection questions, and 1 key takeaway. Check it out at the link in the show notes. And second, if you're ready to do the daily work, not just listen to the show, the Chase Club is where the crew does that together. Daily lessons, monthly challenges, a Friday Chase Club chat club, all of it at the link in the show notes and chasingexcellence.email.
I'm here on the job site with Dale, who's a framing contractor.
Hey, good morning.
Dale traded up to Geico Commercial Auto Insurance for all his business vehicles. We're here where he needs us most.
Yep, they sure are.
We make it easy for him to save on all his insurance needs, all in one place, with coverage that fits his business and bottom line. Oh, I shouldn't have looked down.
It's all right.
We're so far up here.
Look at me. Take a deep breath.
No, I'm good. So good.
Get a commercial auto insurance quote today at geico.com and see how much you could save. It feels good to Geico.